There's a certain kind of person you've met before. Someone who always smiles at the right moments. Someone who laughs easily, makes jokes, brightens the room just by entering it. And yet, somehow, something about them feels slightly off. Not fake, not exactly. More like carefully arranged. People who pretend to be happy are some of the most complex people you'll ever meet. They know how to lift others up, even when they feel like collapsing inside. They know how to bury the heaviness behind their ribs so no one sees the weight of it. They've learned to tuck their sadness behind their eyes and polish it with a smile. The thing is, they weren't born like this. It's a survival strategy, a shield made of sunlight, a mask that looks like warmth. And what makes it so hard to notice is that they're really good at pretending. They've had years to practice. These people learned early on that their true emotions were too much for others. Too heavy, too inconvenient, too complicated. So they shaped themselves into a version that wouldn't scare anyone away. A version that wouldn't burden. A version that would be easy to love. But underneath that practiced happiness is a different kind of truth. A tired truth. A quiet ache. Because pretending to be happy isn't about lying. It's about protecting. Protecting the people around them from their own storms. Protecting themselves from being misunderstood. Protecting their hearts from being dismissed one more time. People who pretend to be happy often come from families where emotions were unpredictable, where everyone depended on them to keep the peace, to make things lighter, softer, more manageable. When a child grows up in an environment like that, they learn to become the emotional buffer for others. They smile so no one worries. They joke so no one argues. They act strong so no one realizes how fragile they feel inside. And then, one day, they're adults doing the same thing. Still performing stability for the world. Still pretending that everything is fine. But here's the interesting part. People who pretend to be happy are incredibly emotionally intelligent. They're hypersensitive to tension. They can feel when someone in the room is upset, even before that person says a word. They sense the shift in someone's voice, the weight in someone's silence, the sadness tucked behind someone else's smile. They know the language of hidden emotions, because it's the language they speak every day. And there's something else about them. They don't break easily. Not because they're strong, but because they've learned how to bend without making a sound. Smiling through pain becomes muscle memory. Laughing becomes armor. Positivity becomes a mask so believable that even they sometimes forget it's a mask. But if you look closely, really closely, you'll notice a small flicker in their expression. Not sadness, not exactly. More like exhaustion. The exhaustion that comes from carrying emotions alone for too long. They've spent years making everyone else comfortable. They just don't know how to make space for their own discomfort. And the world rewards them for it. We need your positivity. You're always so strong. You're the happiest person I know. Compliments that feel like chains wrapped in ribbon. Because deep down, they're afraid that if they ever stopped pretending, people would love them a little less. There are many kinds of masks that people who pretend to be happy learn to wear. Some of them are obvious. Others are nearly impossible to see. The first mask is the cheerful one. It's the smile that always shows up on time. Predictable, practiced, smooth. It's the "I'm fine" that slides off their tongue so effortlessly. You never think to question it. They've used this mask for so long that it feels like second nature. But if you paid attention, you'd notice that their joy never reaches their eyes. Their laughter ends too quickly. Their good mood seems more like a performance than a genuine feeling. The second mask is the helper. These people are always there for others. The friend you can call at midnight, the one who listens without judgment, the one who fixes problems that aren't theirs to fix. They've been the emotional caretaker their whole lives. They're good at it. Too good. But being the helper allows them to hide. As long as they're focusing on other people's problems, no one looks closely at theirs. The third mask is the unbreakable one. This is the strong version of themselves that everyone praises. You never get upset. You always know what to do. You're so calm. Phrases that feel like compliments, but sound more like obligations. Because behind this mask is a truth they rarely admit. They're terrified of falling apart, because they don't know who would help pick up the pieces. Then there's the hardest mask to recognize: the performer. These people can be incredibly social. They laugh loudly. They make jokes. They're the center of attention at parties. You look at them and think, there's no way they're unhappy. But performance is easy. When you don't want anyone looking too closely, people who pretend to be happy often overcompensate. They're charming. They're funny. They're energetic. Because if they ever stopped being the positive one, they fear the people around them would start asking questions they're not ready to answer. The strange thing is, the happier they look, the more pain they're usually carrying. And they hate being asked direct questions. Are you okay? Is something wrong? Are you sure you're fine? These questions feel dangerous, like someone is tugging at a loose thread that could unravel their entire facade. So, they deflect. They make a joke. They change the subject. They smile bigger, wider, brighter. The mask tightens. But here's what most people don't understand. Pretending to be happy doesn't mean they're lying. It means they're hiding. It means they're protecting their most vulnerable parts from a world that hasn't always been gentle with them. And the sad part? Most of them don't even know how to ask for help anymore. They've spent years convincing everyone they're okay. Now they don't know how to admit when they're not. There's a quiet loneliness that comes with being the happy one, because everyone assumes you don't struggle, you don't break, you don't cry, you don't need support. So they become invisible in their pain, not because people don't care, but because people genuinely don't see it. And the longer someone hides behind happiness, the harder it becomes for anyone to reach them. People who pretend to be happy don't do it for attention. They don't do it to manipulate anyone. They do it because somewhere along the way, they learned that showing their true emotions was unsafe. There are 3 core fears that shape this behavior. 3 quiet shadows that follow them everywhere. 1. The fear of being a burden. This is the deepest fear, the one that sits at the bottom of their chest, like a stone they can't swallow. They believe that their sadness is too heavy. Their needs are too much. Their feelings are inconvenient. It's a belief that often comes from childhood. Maybe they had parents who were overwhelmed, emotionally distant, or unpredictable. Maybe they were the responsible one, the child who had to grow up before they were ready. They learned that their own emotions only made things worse, so they learned to carry them silently. Even now, as adults, they apologize for things that aren't their fault. They downplay their struggles. They convince themselves that other people have it harder, so they don't deserve help. They don't pretend to be happy to deceive others. They pretend to protect them. 2. The fear of rejection. People who pretend to be happy often have a fragile relationship with vulnerability. Not because they're weak, but because at some point, someone taught them that vulnerability leads to disappointment. Maybe someone mocked their feelings. Maybe someone ignored their pain. Maybe someone walked away at the worst possible moment. So now, they hide the parts of themselves that feel unlovable. They fear that if people saw the real sadness underneath, they would pull back, hesitate, disappear. They've mastered the art of being easy to love, pleasant, stable, cheerful, undemanding, but it comes at a price. No one ever gets close enough to truly know them. 3. The fear of losing control. When someone spends their whole life suppressing emotions, they develop a strange fear. Not of sadness itself, but of the intensity of it. They're afraid that if they ever let themselves feel everything at once, it would overwhelm them, break them, consume them. So they hold everything in, tight, controlled, contained. A smile becomes a lid on a jar filled with storms. And ironically, the people who seem the most stable on the outside are often the ones holding back the strongest emotions. They can function normally, work, socialize, make jokes, be helpful. But inside, they're constantly monitoring themselves, making sure nothing leaks out. This emotional self-policing is exhausting. Not dramatic, not chaotic, just quietly draining. The paradox. Here's the paradox. The people who pretend to be happy are often the ones who care the most deeply. They love intensely. They understand others intuitively. They feel everything. Sometimes too much. And that's exactly why they hide. They're afraid their intensity will scare people away. So instead, they offer the world a softer, lighter version of themselves. A version that doesn't make anyone uncomfortable. A version that never cries in public. A version that always says, "Don't worry about me." A version that everyone thinks is strong. But strength isn't their problem. Their problem is that no one sees the weight they're carrying. And the longer they pretend, the heavier it becomes. People who pretend to be happy are experts at hiding their emotions. So much so that even the closest people in their lives rarely notice the cracks. But the cracks are there. They always are. You just have to know where to look. 1. Their smile appears faster than their eyes react. A real smile starts in the eyes. It softens them, warms them, lights something up inside. But for people who pretend to be happy, the order is reversed. The smile comes first. Quick, automatic, almost reflexive. The eyes catch up later, or never. It's as if their face knows the script before their emotions do. 2, they're always busy even when they're not. Busyness becomes a convenient shield. If they stay occupied, working, helping, planning, organizing, then no one will ask how they're doing. They fill their days with noise, so they don't have to face the quiet. Stillness is terrifying to them, because stillness leaves room for truth. 3, they give more than they receive. These people are givers by nature. They support, listen, comfort, reassure. They're the friend who shows up with coffee, the sibling who checks in, the coworker who says, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." But when it comes to receiving help, they shut down. They don't know how to let people in, not because they don't want to, but because they're afraid once they open the door, everything they've been holding back will spill out. 4, they change the topic when you get too close. If you ask a superficial question, "How are you?" they'll answer without missing a beat. But if you ask something real, "No, how are you really?" their mask tightens. They laugh. They deflect. They turn the attention back on you. They're terrified of being seen too clearly. 5, they joke about their pain, not in a dramatic way, in a casual, offhand, dismissive way. A joke about being tired. A joke about being emotionally dead. A joke about not having cried in years. Humor makes their pain safer to express, safer to hide in plain sight. 6, they disappear without warning. Sometimes they withdraw. Not dramatically, not with explanations, just quietly. They stop responding. They cancel plans. They become too busy, too tired, overwhelmed with work. This is their reset button, their way of letting the mask slide off. when no one is watching. 7. They look happy in photos, too happy. People who pretend to be happy often perform especially well for cameras. Big smile, bright energy, perfect pose. But the contrast between the photos and the reality is often startling. As soon as the camera disappears, so does the spark, as if the happiness was borrowed, not lived. 8. They never ask for help, even when they need it desperately. This is one of the clearest signs. They'll struggle silently before they ever admit they're hurting, because the idea of being vulnerable still feels dangerous to them. They're afraid that if they reveal even a little of their truth, it will be too much for someone else to handle. The most telling sign of all, people who pretend to be happy often have a strange habit. They comfort others using the exact words they wish someone would say to them. They speak to others the way they want to be understood. They offer the empathy they desperately crave. It's their way of healing indirectly, of giving to others what they don't know how to ask for themselves. Because underneath all their masks, all their practiced smiles, all their quiet strength, is a person who simply wants someone to say, "You don't have to pretend with me." In the end, people who pretend to be happy are not illusions or enigmas to be solved. They are mirrors of resilience, vulnerability, and quiet endurance. Their smiles, their laughter, their endless energy are not signs that life is easy for them, but proof that they have learned to navigate it with grace, despite the weight they carry. Understanding them requires patience, empathy, and a willingness to look beyond the mask. Because beneath every practiced smile is a heart that longs to be seen, a soul that craves understanding, and a simple truth. Sometimes, the greatest act of courage is just letting someone know they don't have to pretend anymore.